I have a list of red flags about a mile long. We're gonna start with the least problematic and we're gonna finish with JR or Nick or Scotty. I don't know. They're kind of all equally problematic, to be completely honest with you. To be clear, every person on this show is a bit problematic in their own way because they ended up on the show. Like this is a natural selection type of deal. You cannot convince me that these are people with healthy relationship attachment styles whatsoever. And you cannot convince me that any of these people should be together. At the point that you're issuing ultimatums to your partner, and not only that, but you're also bringing them on a Netflix television show to basically swap partners with other people, and you're hoping to convince them by doing that to marry you, you have at least one problem. Like, you're at least a little problematic. So we'll get that out of the way. Speaking of getting it out of the way, let's just get the dummies out of the way first. These two men are dummies. And they realized it quickly enough. It still took an embarrassingly long amount of time, in my opinion, to be honest. Bless their hearts. Dummy, dummy. They did not know how good they had it, and they realized it very quickly. And hopefully they're not going to be a dummy again. Ladies, I would still dump these losers, these absolute jokers, but we're gonna go with least problematic because they realized that they fucked up and they got the hell out of that show. They packed up their shit and they fled in the night. They just realized how fucking good they had it, and they realized another man trying to put the moves on was just not gonna work for them. I don't even remember these dudes' names, to be honest, so we're just done with them. They fucked around and they found out, they learned their lesson. Godspeed, gentlemen. Don't fuck it up again. Moving on. How this man managed to be the most checked in and checked out at the same time was really fascinating to me. He was able to foster this beautiful connection with two women at a time, and neither of them ended up happy with him. I think it's because he is so avoidant, like to a complete fault, where he just breaks down when there's conflict. He's just like very passive, you know? He will do things while he perceives that it's like a benefit to him, or as long as he feels like he's getting some sort of validation from the person right next to him. But he completely checks out when it's time to put the pedal to the metal. I think this is why he's been able to keep these baddies in his orbit and like keep women falling for him and having feelings for him, because he gives off this like really nice chill guy. What's that little dog meme? Like, that's him, okay? The chill little dude, that's him for sure. He gives off this like safe kind of vibe, but then when you try to press him for absolutely anything, he just completely checks out and he's like, no, I'm over it. Like, I don't want to talk about it. I don't know what you're talking, like, gaslight you into imagining that you had a beautiful romantic connection that people could very clearly see and even started rooting for y'all. He will literally sit there and to your face deny that any of that is true. And he may very well be right, but my man, you have to realize at some point when you're so passive to a point where letting these things happen to you, right? You're not taking the necessary steps to prevent anything, and then you act surprised when there's consequences to your actions, or like non-actions more. And we don't generally consider these types of men problematic, but we really should, because these men will let their passivity ruin your life, waste some of your best years. These men will let their passivity give you a complex about how you're not good enough. You must be making stuff up and imagining stuff in your head, and about how it must be your disorganized attachment style. He's just so passive. He lets things happen and then is like, well, that wasn't supposed to happen. I can't be held responsible for that. And it's like, no, you should be held responsible for that. If you didn't want something to happen, you have to realize that you have to take steps to prevent that. Does that make sense? I feel like that's why he's problematic, but he is by far the least problematic, which isn't saying much, but he is by far the least problematic of the four men that stayed and stuck it out on the show. That being said, I think I'm gonna have to put Nick third from the top, as I think out of the three remaining men, he is just by a slight margin less toxic, but only because he is so pathetic. And as far as predictions go, I do think that they have for sure broken up. Now, once again, the reason I say Nick is like the least toxic is because he sort of hides his crazy behavior the least. And I actually think that has a lot to do with him being a white man. He's used to being able to play the king baby card and just, be able to throw a tantrum and get his way. So that's exactly what he tries to do several times. Mind you, I think I mentioned this in another video, but mind you, Sandy, his current partner, does not want to marry him because he hasn't shown her what she has said she needs to see. So he's dragging her onto this show, even though I think she's given him some pretty tangible steps to fix what's going on in their relationship to the point where she can say yes to him. She's not just like dragging her feet on a really good guy. She's like, you're not ready for marriage. He's like, I'm giving you an ultimatum. So he's clearly just used to throwing tantrums for tantrum's sake, just to get his way. Overall, his red flags are extremely easy to spot. Gives you an ultimatum instead of changing. Promises that he will change, but it's like very vague and like far off in the distance. The whole like tortured artist thing, it's fine to be an artist, but the way that he was playing it, it just seemed so overdone and over the top. Mind you, I'm also cutting him a lot of slack because his trial marriage partner literally ran off the show. He was just kind of forced to sit there in an empty apartment. And this happened to Mariah as well, albeit she took it much differently and much better. So clearly it's possible to like keep it together, but I could see how it would be very upsetting. At the same time, after that happened, he went ahead and just crossed every single boundary that he could have crossed to interfere with Sandy's trial marriage. So this is where the red flags just start flying in, because the very first morning that these two spent the night apart, Sandy comes home from picking up coffee and is like, oh yeah, I ran into Nick at the Starbucks and he basically had a meltdown, like whatever, I had to talk him off the ledge. He's been calling me hundreds of times a day. Really creepy, unsettling behavior. But also, now that I think about it, I might actually move him higher because I can see him in like a very exceptional circumstance actually taking this to like annihilator levels if he was triggered enough. So because he's so unstable. But there was so many things that this man did that are just giant waving red flags. His masculinity was so threatened by just the presence of JR. The fact that this man is like kind of a virtual opposite of him just really triggered him. He really hated it. He went out there and got the same tattoo as JR had in the same place that JR had it. I think as like a last ditch attempt to be like, no, see, I can be cool like this guy. It just got real creepy, like real fast. The fact that he was like crying and howling, like I'm all for men being allowed to express their emotions, but he was doing it in such a way as to really try and affect Sandy. I think his goal was to kind of lure her out of this trial marriage, which once again, he brought her on the show to do this. He just didn't think that she would end up choosing JR. He probably would have felt a lot better if she went with someone like Caleb or Dave. I don't know, just Jason. He would have felt a lot better if she went with an equal or lesser level of masculinity, like macho masculinity, than Nick is. But she went ahead and she sort of like out alphaed him by choosing what all the men very clearly deferred to as the alpha male on this show. This season was a fascinating watch to me. I know that people leaving was disappointing, but this was a masterclass in the patriarchy, let me just tell y'all. Nick basically never gets over this, and he tries really hard to pretend like it doesn't bother him, but it bothers the fuck out of him. Now, I will say, Sandy took full advantage of the experiment with JR. But before I say this part, I want y'all to know it's not like I think her motives are pure, but it was also for me the fact that Nick kept trying to insist on like intimacy with her after this experience, saying that it would like really validate him and like he would really like to have that with her, and just didn't feel any type of way about pressuring her into that. And she very clearly did not want to do that, and he just was not like reading the room or taking the hint. Now again, I think the reason she didn't want to do that is because she actually slept with somebody else on the show. Feels weird about that, which yeah, you should. Either wants to like get tested, is maybe just trickle truthing, because they're definitely trickle truthing their relationship. They're saying they only kissed twice, which is very, very obviously not true, judging by their body language and just how they chose to handle existing in this arrangement together. I don't think a lot of the other couples even shared a bed. So I don't really blame Nick for being insecure, but he is insecure to a point that he's trying to manipulate somebody else's boundaries instead of his own, right? If he was like, hey, it's super weird that you won't be like intimate with me, that doesn't sit right with me, I feel very invalidated. Like, honestly, you're trickle truthing and I'm just gonna leave. I'm gonna dip out of here. I'm breaking up with you. That's a healthy boundary. Pushing somebody saying that I won't feel validated unless you have sex with me, very different type of vibe. That's a very coercive vibe. It's okay for you to call somebody out. It's okay for you to set your boundary, but it's not okay for you to try and push and manipulate other people's boundaries like that, especially their physical intimacy boundaries. Yeah, after a little bit of deliberation with myself, I have actually decided to go ahead and switch Nick and JR. So JR is officially now the third least problematic because I think he's just a fuckboy. And I know people had kind of the most hate for him after this season, but this is very clearly just an insecure fuckboy. This is somebody who takes a great amount of effort and pride in their like physical appearance, in how they present and how they come off to other people. Deep down inside, you can tell they're actually very insecure. They probably did not grow up being considered conventionally attractive. Maybe they grew up like financially humiliated. Maybe they grew up in somebody else's shadow. Whatever the reason may be, they're good looking now, but they are not acting like it. They're acting like a fuckboy. So because of that, he can't really actually respect any partner that he's with, and that includes both Zaina and Sandy. You can tell that this is a guy who starts out every relationship by hyping the woman up and telling her exactly what she wants to hear, but it's all just things like, oh, you're gonna be a great wife and mother, and like, oh, you're such a badass, and oh, you're so beautiful. He's trying to hype you up and butter you up. And he's front loading all the work. He's putting in all the work he's ever gonna do in the relationship up front. And from then on out, you're never going to get that man back. And this is why women stay fighting for these fuckboys, because they will always love bomb you in the beginning, right before they completely pull back and make you feel really insignificant. Start having eyes for other women, start disrespecting you in public, dragging their feet on whether they want to marry you or not. The whole time you're thinking, but you were obsessed with me when we met. If I could just recapture that spark. And I just know that's what Zaina's thinking, and it just breaks my heart, because that whole spark in the beginning, that was just love bombing. That was him just absolutely straight out lying to you to secure a woman's presence in his life, because a lot of men know that they need that. A lot of men know that they won't be taken seriously without it. Men also realize that if they don't partner up, eventually they're gonna have to do their own laundry and cook their own meals and pick up after themselves, which is very clear that JR is this kind of man, because Sandy was doing his laundry for him on like day 2. She even specifically had to ask him like, hey, what do you want washed? And he was like, oh, it's on the laundry basket. And she was like, okay, what about the stuff on the bed? What about the stuff by the foot of the bed? What about this? And he was like, oh yeah, I guess. And it's like, yeah, he's very clearly looking for a mommy bang maid. Like, very clearly wants somebody there to keep house, to do his laundry, to cook his meals, rub his feet, hype him up, make the bed, vacuum the floors, all that kind of stuff, so that he can contribute 50%. I just know this is a 50-50 couple, so that he can contribute exactly 50%, save up the rest of the money for himself, spend it on himself, spend it on like random girls at the gym. That's what he's doing. And he just wants a woman that he can come home to. It makes me feel so bad seeing women this desperate, because this man literally not at one point in the show says that he wants to marry Zaina. And like days into his trial marriage with this random woman, he's calling her his wife. He's like being really protective of her. He's like talking with her about children. Like, whoa. Yeah, he just doesn't want to marry you. He definitely wants to get married. He's just waiting for an upgrade. And the reason I know he's waiting for an upgrade is because he very specifically discussed being with a white woman. Man right here, Nick. No, not Nick. I forget their names. They were sitting there talking about whether they had ever been with a white girl before, like been in a relationship with a white girl before, and JR was saying like, yeah, I want to try that out. He's clearly exhibiting a very disturbing kind of mindset towards women in general. But just the fact that he can think of them as such interchangeable objects, like I want to try that out, is very disturbing. That's just how fuckboys think. You know what I mean? They're just, that's what's in there. It was also disturbing when he said he sees so much more in Sandy than he does in Arya. I just feel like that was a weird comment as well. You could even tell the way that he was with these two women on their first like official little sit down, like date or whatever. With Sandy, he was definitely trying to flatter her. He was trying to get into her good graces. Like he was trying to ask questions. He was trying to be thoughtful. Whereas with Arya, he was extremely serious. It felt like a job interview. He was like, so what do you bring to the table, basically? Whereas with Sandy, he's like, oh, you're this, you're that, you're a fucking superstar. Like, I love you so much, basically, on their first date. Like, it was very clear that there was one woman that really, like, had his interest and his attention, and another woman that he was just interviewing for the role of a mommy bang maid. But even with that, I feel like once he kind of knows that Sandy's gonna choose him, I think she goes first and she makes him her choice. And when he's talking about who he's gonna choose, he throws a little neg in there for Sandy. He goes, if I saw her in a bar, definitely wouldn't have looked at her twice, which is crazy because he was like immediately obsessed with her. And the way that he was talking to her seemed like he was taken and in love with her from the very start. Wouldn't look at you twice in the bar. Like, no, sir, you absolutely would. But yeah, he still tries to nag her, which is just amazing. Like, chef's kiss. Also just very clearly has the singular goal of getting into this woman's pants. Like, that's what he was talking about trying out. Yeah, there was definitely this element of like he wanted to conquer her. Like this was definitely a conquest for him. And he got right to it. Like as soon as they got into that apartment, he starts like literally making sexual innuendos and things like that. I know there's editing there, but it just seems like it was that same day that they got in and he was like trying to put the moves on her. I forget exactly what he said, but compliments Sandy on how cool she is and like how chill she is, which if a man ever compliments you on being a cool girl or a chill girl, run. Also do some introspection because somewhere along the way you took a wrong turn. Just know that that's what that means. If a man tries to compliment you by calling you cool or chill, you fucked up somewhere. You took the wrong turn. Go back and retrace your steps, girl. Really, my favorite part was when JR told Sandy that he doesn't want to have kids until he's 40. And in the same breath goes, yeah, I know that women have like a timeline and a biological clock, but I don't want to be on that timeline. So right away, you know how he feels. You know that this man is selfish level 1000. 1000. Like he cares so little about your experience as a woman that he's like, I don't even want to be on the same biological timeline as you bitches. Like, but because he called Sandy chill and cool, she obviously feels like she has to go ahead and act like she's very chill and cool with that. Don't get got by these men. Like this is a very simple trap, right? They give you a compliment and then you feel like you have to act like that. Don't do that. That's crazy. This is why they compliment you like that. He also told Sandy that he like wants to connect with her, but the closest way that he can imagine connecting emotionally is sex. But that's why it's been great that they've been able to kiss, because otherwise he wouldn't feel like he had any connection with her at all. And the way that her face fell when he said all that, I was like, girl, hold on to that feeling. Hold on to that feeling and know this is how most men feel about us. They really think that the only way to connect with women emotionally is through sex, which is crazy because sex is a physical connection. Actually, for a lot of people, has very little to do with emotions, especially very clearly some of these men. Has nothing to do with their emotions. It has everything to do with them wanting to satisfy a physical urge. That's it. And the final red flag that I wrote down about him is that he was using his previous marriage to justify being secretive in a relationship. He was saying like, About posting each other on Instagram, he said, yeah, I think the female should post first of all. Right there, right then and there. Pack your bags, pack your bags. Female? So he says, yeah, I think the female should be allowed to post. Like, she can post them all she wants, but the male should not be forced to share his relationship, put his relationship out there. And his justification for that was like that there was infidelity in his last marriage. He was saying that a man shouldn't post pictures like with somebody else because it like invites other women into their DMs and like to try. Women are Jezebels and they will try to ruin your relationship if the man starts posting you, which is crazy because how are women supposed to know if you're not single? It'll be the same thing if you're posted up as single. So how are women supposed to know that you're not single? And also, why would you entertain those women? Like, if you're so concerned about cheating, just don't cheat. But it sounds like the infidelity in his last marriage was probably on his side. And he's being so vague about it because he doesn't want to be called out on the fact that he's a cheater. You're probably a serial cheater. He doesn't want to admit that, so he's using this vague, like, oh, there was infidelity. I don't know. Interesting. He also said something to the effect of like, oh, once a woman gets a ring, she switches up on you. Which probably means she starts having like higher expectations for you as a man to like take responsibility, but who knows. Also, very obviously calling somebody your fucking wife like 2 days into meeting them or starting a trial marriage with them or whatever is certifiably fucking insane. The amount of times that he called Sandy his wife is crazy, for the fact that, also considering the fact that he never once has said that he wants to marry Zaina or that he sees her as a wife or anything like that. But this woman was wifey hours into them moving into that apartment, which is absolutely fucking wild. The worst way to nag your partner for the entire world to see. Like, I just cannot imagine being that much more intentionally cruel to a woman who has done nothing but stand by me for 3 years and want to marry me and clearly do things, like go out of her way to do things for me. Very cruel treatment. So, but at the end of the day, this is just a fuckboy. The reason that his behavior seems so cruel and yet so nonchalant is because he's only thinking about himself. In every single situation, he's only thinking about himself. So that's that. Now, the reason that at the end of the day, the top spot is going to go to Scotty is because for how young he is way too good at what he's doing. This young man is an expert gaslighter, manipulator, possibly has some dark triad characteristics. He is disturbingly young to be this bold and brazen with how he's trying to completely unravel these women. The way that he gets so mad at certain things really shows you what he cares about at the end of the day. And it is not either of these two women. First off, he keeps repeating that, oh, as one of the only men that issued an ultimatum. That's like his whole fucking catchphrase. Okay, Scotty, we get it. You issued the ultimatum. Why doesn't your partner want to marry you? Your partner has reasons for not marrying you that you could fix. This is the case with a lot of these men that bring their girlfriends onto the ultimatum. It's like, the issues have been laid out for you. The woman has made it clear, and yet you're still like, no, marry me or else. That's the only option you have. You don't have the option of me like changing or compromising your needs to fit what you desire in a relationship. And if I can't have you, nobody else can. It's very much that kind of mindset. It's terrible. If you're ready to get married and your partner's not, and this goes for men and women, you need to leave. Like, this is not something that can be fixed by an ultimatum or by a TV show. You're only putting a band-aid on a festering wound. This man is an absolute professional. Has this down to an art, down to a science. And Zaina being able to see it and call him out on it was such a great moment in the show. I'm so glad she called him out, packed her shit and left. But that's because she is quite a bit older. A guy like this can be a real problem for a lot of young women who just don't have like the experience or the wherewithal yet or the frontal lobe development or whatever to really see this stuff and stand up to it and like call it out and do so confidently. Because a lot of young women make the mistake of thinking, well, what if I'm wrong? And it's like, no, at the point that you feel threatened, sad, unloved. Like, you're not wrong. That man is doing something to you. They were at the big mixer and he started like very openly flirting with Zaina and like holding hands with her and stuff like that. His girlfriend Arya made it clear that when she tried to confront him about this, she made it clear that they apparently had a boundary that they would talk about, you know, before crossing like physical boundaries with other people or just getting all touchy-feely. You know, I would have preferred you not to do that in front of me. I would have preferred us to talk about it first, like we said we would, all this stuff. And this man completely like turned villain on her. He like turned on a dime and he went from this sweet, like chatting up Zaina, telling her how awesome and beautiful and perfect she's going to be as a wife and as a mother, went and just flipped a switch on the woman that he says, again, as one of the two men who gave the ultimatum on the show. He apparently like loves the fuck out of this woman, wants to marry her, but when she brings up a singular concern that apparently they had talked about and that apparently he crossed a line that he shouldn't have, he completely flips out and shuts down on her, clams up, is like, I'm over it, I'm done having this conversation, then starts yelling at her at this mixer. So red flag behavior was on display like right away. I got extremely nervous for both women right then and there because I was like, this man is a villain. He's evil and he's unstable. And what his previous partner said about him that turned out to be very demonstrably true is that he always has to have the last word. And he's just one of those people where like arguing with him gets you absolutely nowhere. Ladies, for reference, that's a narcissist. Someone who can never be wrong, someone who's never done anything wrong in their life, that's a narcissist. Because they're people that cannot see in a gray scale. They cannot accept that fact about themselves that they have ever made a mistake before. They hate the idea that they are imperfect in some way because they only see things as black and white. It's all very binary to them. It's either good or bad. They're either good or bad. Other people are either good or bad. And they have a lot of trouble navigating the world in a healthy way because of that. And they make a lot of people their unwitting victims. Other red flags include being extremely threatened when Zaina's better than him at basketball and darts. He gets genuinely upset both times when she beats him or when she's very clearly like better than him and doesn't like throw the game so that he can feel like a big man and win. He gets like legit mad at her. Like, it was so bad. It was so cringe to watch. At one point, Zaina also goes, hey, I want to clean out this closet today. And she's like, well, we can make it a group activity if you want. You know, she's kind of offering like, hey, let's like do something together. And he meets her without ever acknowledging her offer to hang out and clean the closet together. He just completely dismisses it and says, I want to get out of the house today. Let's get out of the house. And you can tell she's confused, but she's like, okay, like, what do you want to do? And he's like, we should go like skydiving or something. She's like, what? I would never do that. Like, I'm scared of heights. I don't want to do that. And he nags her about being scared of heights and not wanting to go skydiving on a fucking whim. That's the kind of man we're talking about, mind you. He also nags her about her age at one point. He's like, oh, is this what being 32 is like? And she's like, what the fuck? No, these are like my literal preferences. That has nothing to do with my age. And she tries to explain all this to him calmly and patiently, and he just won't hear any of it. He's like, this is bullshit. Like, I'm over it. I'm like done. And he just wants her to feel shitty. You can tell. And again, when she confronts him about that, he goes, I have a problem with rejection. And Zaina says, did me saying no to certain activities feel like a rejection of you? And he was like, yeah, like, obviously, what do you mean? And she was like, no, like, I was rejecting the activity, not you. And he's like, I don't see the difference. It's kind of like taking out his emotional immaturity on her and making it her problem. There was also a day that he got really mad because she ate without him. He was like, did you eat without me? And then like threw an entire tantrum about it. That was actually kind of scary. He was like, I just can't believe you would do that. When JR confronted him about the rumors that he must have been spreading about him, about JR just wanting to be on the show to get a hall pass and things like that. Now, while that may mostly be true, in my opinion, hate to agree with the worst person on the show, but I do think he's right. But how he went about everything was extremely disgusting, right? He just about shit his pants when JR confronted him. he turned into like a groveling little dog and tried to blame it on Zaina, and then multiple times kept trying to accuse Zaina like texting with someone or like trying to hook back up with JR, and he just was not hearing her out. Just keeps berating her and gaslighting her. It's like as if he's not hearing the things that she's saying, and he just keeps going with his thing, with his accusations. And there's literally nothing that she can say in order for him to be like, oh, my bad. I must have misunderstood. I must have miscommunicated. And it's also like, why do you care? She's literally not your wife. Like, she's not beholden to you in any way. They have their phones. They're allowed to call and text whoever they want, especially the person that they've been with for the past like 3 years. Even if she was doing that, it wouldn't be that far like out of line. She's not committing to him for the rest of her life. She's trying to commit to this guy. Like, why would you get your panties in a bunch about her texting? Overall, like the biggest and scariest thing about Scotty is his insecurity. You know, you see it once he gets back together with Arya and they start living together. Like, his insecurity just comes out around every single corner. He tends to nag women, he tends to manipulate women, he tends to gaslight women. He has this like sociopathic factor to him where you can tell he's just sussing out people's reactions and then going from there. Like, he doesn't have a genuine and like authentic personality. He is just whoever he needs to be in that moment, which is a very scary type of person. That's a person that you don't really know. So even if they're nice to you behind closed doors, but you see a person like switching up based on like whatever company they're in, and I'm talking like switching up their entire demeanor, their morals, the things that they swear that they stand on, all of a sudden they're like, oh, I don't care about that. That's a scary person. You should run. Now, honestly, I could talk about this shit for hours, but I'm gonna spare y'all because I know this isn't even one of the more popular reality TV series out there. I just thought it would be helpful to really lay out all of those red flags in hopes that y'all can catch them early when y'all are out there dating and dealing with men in any capacity. Everything I say applies to romantic relationships, but it also applies to your friendships with men, your male relatives. Like, they also have red flags. They can also ruin your life. Do you know what I mean? And most of these men's biggest object when it comes to women is to see if they can like destabilize them, to see if they can nag them into submission, nag them into accepting less than desirable circumstances. If they can manipulate them into thinking that something's wrong with them rather than this man that won't commit. They're just not willing to take blame or responsibility or anything like that at the end of the day. And the reason that that's so dangerous to you as a woman is because that's actually going to mess with your psyche. It's going to mess with your brain chemistry. You're going to start doubting yourself. You're going to start ignoring your intuition, when both of those things are extremely important not to do. You should never doubt yourself or ignore your intuition, especially when you're dealing with men. Trust me, men do not know what they're talking about. Whenever a man is trying to convince you that this is why he didn't really cheat on you, this is why he said what he said, or like, this is why he doesn't have to apologize, and you have any sort of like weird feeling about it, trust yourself. You know better than a man. You've been taught to like tap into and use your feelings, your emotions, your intuition. And all of a sudden, when you get into a relationship with a man, they want to cut you off from your relationship to yourself. That's what all of these men are trying to do. Men who are going out of their way to like not give you what you want and but also not break up with you. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to manipulate you instead into accepting worse conditions than you want. That is the real truth at the end of the day, ladies. So do not stick around trying to impress these men because they don't really love you. At the end of the day, a lot of it for them comes down to either self-validation or validation from other men. That's really what they're after. They're not even after validation from you. The biggest reason for that is because they themselves are insecure. That's why they will go out of their way to try and make you insecure as well, by nagging you, by gaslighting you, by cheating on you, lying to you. All that stuff they do on purpose, whether they're aware of it or not, but they do that stuff on purpose. And the purpose is to keep you down, to keep you from asking too many questions, to keep you from actually holding them accountable or responsible or anything like that. And the worst part is they won't let you go either because they want to continue benefiting from you at your expense like a parasite. And they don't want to take all the trouble of like switching hosts too often because then they look ran through, then they look undependable. But if they can, waste 3, 4, 5 years here and there with multiple women because they don't want to be on women's timelines, they don't want to get married till they're 40, they don't want to have kids until they're 70, all this stuff. And so that's why they use women in like chunks of time at a time. They'll be like 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, but 10 years. By God, they'll take 12, they'll take 15. There's women that have been with a man for 20 years waiting for a ring. He has absolutely no reason after 20 years to not give you a ring, but he also won't let you go because you're a good host. You don't complain too much. You let him do whatever he wants. And the only thing he has to do is just exist. Perfect setup for him. And if y'all think that men not leaving you is proof that they love you, please don't be crazy. Please don't be crazy. There's clearly men that will stay with a woman for 3, 4, 5 years and they very clearly don't love her and don't care about her and will be calling another woman their wife 2 hours into some fucked up little social experiment. Please stay safe out there, ladies. Protect your space. You are so much better off without men like this. If it's like any of this, I promise you, you don't want it. Do not idealize any of these relationships. Hold out for what you really want. And stay safe out there. Godspeed. I love you so much.